Hello, welcome to the Cheater's Diary, where we share raw, emotional stories and unforgettable twists. If you love this video, hit that like button and subscribe to join us in spreading meaningful stories. Now, let's dive into today's journey. I'm Colton, just Colton 26, living in a quiet little town in Oregon. For the past 2 years, I've been working remotely as a graphic designer. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. And, more importantly, gives me time to dream. Since I was a kid, I've had one dream: to hit the road in a van, explore America, and live free as the wind. Back in Ukraine, I sketched designs of my future mobile home. I pinned maps to my bedroom wall, circling cities I wanted to visit. New Orleans, Seattle, Santa Fe, imagining pulling over anywhere, meeting people, living untethered. It sounds crazy, but that childhood dream never left me. A few months ago, I found her. A beat-up, dusty, rusty Dodge B350, but perfect. I named her Voyager. I spent weeks fixing her up, turning the inside into a tiny home. A compact bed, storage shelves, a camping stove, even a small solar panel. My friends called me nuts. I didn't care. This was my dream, and I was ready to make it real. This morning, I woke up knowing today was the day. The day I'd leave. My heart raced, not from fear, but from excitement. I spent the morning packing: clothes, my camera, an old coffee mug I can't live without, a few books I know I won't read but feel better having. A Route 66 guidebook, underlined from when I was a kid, sat neatly in my bag. It reminded me why I was doing this: for the open road, for untold stories. I strapped my bike to the rack on the back, tightened the final bungee cord, sweat dripping down my forehead. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Where are you headed?" I turned around. It was Maris, my neighbor. She's about 42, but looks younger. Tall, striking, with wavy brown hair, always perfectly styled. I'd see her watering her flowers out front or standing on her porch with a glass of wine, staring into the distance. Once I saw her linger there, eyes searching for something lost. We hadn't talked much, just polite hellos. I knew she'd recently divorced and lived alone. I wiped my sweat, grinned. Yeah, I'm hitting the road. Gonna see America. Her eyes lit up. She stepped closer, eyeing the rusty van. For real? Not many people chase their dreams like that. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Took me long enough to try. Then, without thinking, I blurted out a joke. "If you were my age, I'd ask you to come along." Maris tilted her head, giving a half smile, like she knew something I didn't. "What's stopping you?" she said. I froze. Time stopped. I stared, trying to figure out if she was serious or joking. "What?" I stammered. She laughed, her voice warm. "I mean it. Nothing's holding me here. I haven't done anything spontaneous in years. If you're okay with it, I'm in." I scratched my neck, heart pounding. Was this real? My elegant, mysterious neighbor wanted to hop in my van and dive into the unknown? "You serious?" I asked, probably for the third time. She nodded firmly. "Hell yeah, I'm serious." I laughed, a little shaky. "Well, go pack then." Maris winked, turned, and headed back to her house. I stood there, stunned, watching her disappear behind her door. What was happening? The woman who'd been a passing figure was about to hit the road with me? I looked at Voyager like I was asking her if she was ready for this. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the feeling that an adventure bigger than my dream was beginning. I stood there, stunned, watching Maris disappear behind her door. My heart was racing. What just happened? A joke, a split-second impulse, and now my mysterious neighbor was about to join me in my van, diving into a planless journey? I looked at Voyager, the dusty old van, as if asking if it was ready for this. I still couldn't believe it. Maris, the elegant woman with wavy brown hair, the one I'd only ever waved to, wanted to leave her quiet life to come with me? I shook my head, trying to stay calm, but a grin wouldn't leave my face. 30 minutes later, Maris's door swung open. She walked out, pulling a small suitcase, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a leather jacket. Her eyes sparkled. No hesitation. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, like she'd decided this long ago. I stood there, still half thinking I was dreaming. She didn't look like someone just strolling the neighborhood. She looked ready to take on the world. I opened the passenger door, saying nothing. Maris climbed in, stashed her suitcase at her feet, and looked around the van's interior. "This place, it's got character," she said, smirking. I laughed.
Into the driver's
Not
seat.
fancy,
Heart
but still
reliable.
racing. I glanced at Maris. She sat comfortably, hands clasped on her lap, staring out the window like she was ready for anything. I turned the key, and Voyager's engine roared to life. "You sure about this?" I asked, half joking. She turned, eyes blazing. "More sure than ever, Colton." I nodded, hit the gas, and the van rolled forward. The highway stretched ahead. No plans, no reservations, just two strangers, an old van, and the horizon. The first few miles were surreal. I couldn't believe I was doing this. I'd dreamed of this trip since I was a kid in Ukraine, sketching vans and circling destinations on maps. But now, I wasn't alone. Maris sat beside me, brown hair fluttering in the breeze from the cracked window, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but a slight smile told me she was soaking it in. Silence settled, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like we were both absorbing the freedom. Then Maris spoke, her voice warm, curious. "So, where's our first stop?" I grinned, gripping the wheel. "I'm thinking classic spots, Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, maybe Route 66. The plan's flexible." She nodded, like that's exactly what she wanted to hear. "I like that. Just follow the road." I glanced at her, trying to figure out what made her decide so fast. She'd just divorced, used to stand on her porch with that wine glass, eyes lost in thought. Maybe she needed this trip as much as I did. "What did you leave behind back there?" I asked, half teasing. She smiled faintly, looking at the road. "Just some bills and a house that's too quiet." I nodded, not pressing further. The road stretched on, Oregon's forests giving way to wide-open highways. The sun shone, sharpening everything. Maris pointed at an old billboard, laughing. "You ever stop at those world's largest attractions?" I shook my head. "Nope, but if you want, we can try one." She smirked. Challenge accepted. I laughed, feeling lighter. This wasn't just my trip anymore. It was ours. Voyager rolled on, carrying two people who barely knew each other but were ready to explore together. I didn't know where these roads would lead, but my heart raced, and for the first time, I felt like anything was possible. Voyager cruised down the highway, taking me and Maris away from our small Oregon town. Sunlight poured through the windshield, lighting up the van's worn interior. Maris sat beside me, feet propped up, sunglasses on, brown hair fluttering in the breeze from the cracked window. I glanced at her, still in disbelief she was here. The elegant neighbor I'd barely spoken to was now my road trip partner, joining me on a dream I'd had since I was a kid. The silence between us felt easy, like we were both savoring the freedom. We drove through rolling hills, wide fields, and tiny towns forgotten by time. Maris took in everything, the faded signs at old gas stations, giant billboards, even quirky roadside stops. "You see that dinosaur statue?" She pointed, grinning wide. I shook my head, chuckling. "Not yet, but we can stop." We pulled over, snapping silly photos by the world's largest dinosaur. Maris posed like she was running from it, and I pretended to push it over. We laughed harder than I had in months. Every hour we'd stop, sometimes for gas or coffee, sometimes just to stretch. At one rest stop, Maris climbed onto the van's hood, teaching me a goofy dance from her younger days, arms flailing like a rock star. "You're too slow, Colton," she teased, pulling me to join her. I was clumsy, but I laughed, not caring who saw. She had an energy I hadn't expected, free, youthful, like her divorce had unlocked a part of her. As the sun set, we reached a small campground outside Reno, Nevada. I parked Voyager under tall pines and cut the engine. "Home for tonight," I said, half joking. I worried Maris might find it rough. Voyager was basic. A mattress, curtains, some DIY amenities. But she smiled, looking around. "I like it." I gave her the bed, planning to sleep in the driver's seat. It wasn't comfy, but I wanted her to have space. I reclined the seat, pulled a thin blanket over me, and tried to get comfortable. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, lulling me into a fitful sleep. In the middle of the night, a soft tap woke me. Maris stood at the window, hair loosely tied, wearing an oversized hoodie. "You're really sleeping out there," she whispered, teasing. I grinned sleepily. "Yeah, I wanted you to have the bed." She shook her head, chuckling. "You're ridiculous, Colton. Good night." She went back to the bed, leaving me with the stiff seat and a sore neck. The next morning, I woke up aching all over. I stepped outside, stretched, and saw Maris already up. She'd tied her hair in a ponytail, wearing sweats, brewing coffee on the camp stove I rarely used. "Morning, road warrior," she teased, handing me a mug. I rubbed my eyes, smiling. Folding chairs, sipping coffee, watching the sunrise. Golden light bathed the campground, calm and perfect. I realized this trip wasn't just about checking off places on a map. It was about moments like this, small but flawless. Maris pointed at a bird flying by. "Ever think you'd be doing this with a stranger?" I shook my head. "Never, but you don't feel like a stranger." She smiled, saying nothing, but her eyes agreed. We packed up and hit the road again. Voyager cruised through deserts, winding roads, and small towns with retro diners. Maris navigated with a map, sometimes singing along to classic rock on the radio. I was shocked she knew the lyrics to Sweet Home Alabama better than I did. "You are a rock fan, huh?" I asked. She smirked. "Maybe. Used to sneak out to concerts in Portland when I was young." I laughed, picturing a teenage Maris, hair wild, screaming at a band. She wasn't just my neighbor anymore. She was a story, and I was uncovering it page by page. Voyager rolled through desert roads, carrying me and Maris to places I'd only seen on maps. The sun blazed, but the vibe in the van stayed light. Maris sat beside me, feet on the dash, humming to the radio. We'd been on the road for over a week, and the initial awkwardness was gone. She wasn't the mysterious neighbor anymore. She was Maris, the one who laughed when I spilled coffee, who shared stories of sneaking to concerts as a teen, who made this trip more alive than I'd ever dreamed. We stopped at Monument Valley, where massive red rock formations rose from the desert. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple. Maris spread a blanket by the van, and we lay there, stargazing. The sky was crystal clear, like we could touch the stars. "This is exactly how I pictured it," I whispered. Maris turned her head, smiling. "Me too." Silence settled, but it wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid. I realized this trip wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. That night, I reclined the driver's seat again, pulling a thin blanket over me. Maris tapped the window, as usual. "Still stubborn about sleeping out there?" she teased. Hair messy, hoodie loose. I grinned sleepily. "You need the bed." She shook her head, laughing, and went back inside. The next morning, we drank coffee by the van, talking about where to go next. "Yellowstone," she said, eyes bright. "I want to see the geysers." I nodded. "It's on the list." The drive to Yellowstone was long, but the scenery made it easy to forget tired legs. Endless plains, jagged mountains, rivers winding like paintings. Maris snapped photos of everything. A herd of deer by the road, a faded sign, even me filling gas, unaware she was shooting. "You've got an artist's eye," I said, looking at her photos. She shrugged, smiling. "Just like capturing moments." I looked at her longer than I meant to, realizing she brought these days to life. At Yellowstone, the nights were freezing. We parked at a remote campground, the wind whistling through the windows. Maris shivered as she stepped outside, pulling her jacket tight. "Let's sleep inside tonight," I suggested. She nodded, teeth chattering. "Good call." I arranged blankets, ready to take the driver's seat as usual. Maris grabbed my arm, her voice soft but firm. "Colton, it's freezing. Stop being stubborn. Share the bed. There's room. We're adults." I hesitated, heart racing. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. She looked at me, smiling gently. "I trust you." Those 3 words melted my defenses. I nodded, climbed into the bed, keeping my distance. The van was dark, only faint moonlight through the small window. We lay there, silent. I heard her steady breathing, trying not to think about how close she was. Then she whispered, "Thanks for letting me come along." I needed this more than I thought. I turned my head, though I could barely see her in the dark. "You're the best road partner I could have asked for." She didn't reply, but I felt her smile. The next morning, golden sunlight flooded the van. We didn't rush to leave. We ate breakfast, hiked through geothermal fields, watched geysers erupt, and saw a bison lumber across the road. Maris grabbed my hand as we stood by a still lake, its surface mirroring the mountains like glass. "Ever feel like you're exactly where you're meant to be?" she asked. I squeezed her hand. "Right now, yeah." That afternoon, as we left Yellowstone, Maris rested her head on my shoulder while I drove. No words were needed, but the gesture said everything. We weren't just neighbors on a trip anymore. Something deeper, unspoken, was growing. I drove, my heart light, feeling like the road ahead led not just to new places, but to something I'd never dared to dream. Winding through rugged cliffs, the ocean sprawling to our right. Salty wind blew through the windows, tossing Maris's hair. She laughed loudly, reaching out like she could grab the air. "I've never felt this free," she shouted, drowning out the crashing waves. I glanced at her, grinning. Me neither. Maris, the neighbor who once stood quietly on her porch with a wine glass, was now like a teenager, living every second. This trip wasn't just my dream anymore. It was ours. We stopped in Big Sur, where deep blue seas met mountains. Maris dragged me to every lookout for photos. She stood on a rock, arms spread like she owned the ocean. I pretended to push the van off a cliff, making her laugh so hard she doubled over. "You're such a dork, Colton," she said, running to shove me back. That night, we camped near a secluded beach. I built a fire from driftwood, and Maris made peanut butter sandwiches. We sat by the flames, watching the water shimmer under moonlight. The waves crashed softly, hypnotic. "I almost didn't do this," she said quietly. I touched her shoulder. "Me too." The weeks that followed were a blur of adventure. We explored Bryce Canyon, hiked the sandy curves of Antelope Canyon, trekked to a hidden waterfall in California's forests. Maris brought Voyager to life. She'd make me stop for fields of wildflowers or neon-lit diners. "You've got to try their pie," she'd say, pulling me into a tiny Colorado spot. We ate burgers, sipped milkshakes, and laughed when the waitress called us the cute road trip couple. My heart skipped, but I just grinned, glancing at Maris. She winked like she felt it too. One afternoon, by a calm lake in Colorado, the water mirrored snowy mountains. Maris kicked off her shoes, yelled, "Let's swim," and ran into the water. "It's freezing," I shouted from the shore. She shrugged, grinning mischievously. "You only live once, Colton." I shook my head, then dove in. The water was ice cold, stealing my breath, but her laughter made it worth it. We climbed onto a flat rock lying in the sun, our breaths mixing. I looked at her, sunlight dancing on her skin. She caught my gaze, and neither of us spoke. In that moment, I knew everything had changed. That night, we parked at a valley lookout, the sky full of stars. Maris spread a blanket, pulling out cheap wine from a gas station. We sat shoulder to shoulder, talking about everything. She opened up about her divorce, about days when she forgot how to live for herself. "I thought I'd be stuck forever," she said, voice low. I took her hand. "You made this trip the best thing I've ever done." She smiled, her face unreal in the moonlight. "You too, Colton." Without thinking, I held her hand tighter. She didn't pull away, resting her head on my shoulder. "If you were my age, I'd ask you to come along," I whispered, echoing my joke from day one. She laughed softly, squeezing my hand. "The best part is, I'm this age, and I still came." I turned, meeting her eyes. All the unspoken feelings became clear. I kissed her, gently, and she kissed back. Not rushed, not reckless, just natural, like everything between us since mile one. That night, in the van, we lay side by side, no distance between us. "I'm glad you said yes," I whispered in the dark. Maris rested her head on my chest. "Me too." Crickets chirped, the mountain air cool, her steady breathing beside me. I fell asleep, knowing this trip wasn't just about the road. It was about us, about what we were becoming. The next morning, the sun rose, and I woke with Maris beside me, her smile promising new roads ahead. After a 7,000-mile journey spanning 2 months, Colton and Maris finally returned to Oregon. Voyager's tires rolled slowly down the familiar road, carrying memories of dusty highways, moonlit nights, and the love that had grown between them. But as Colton's small house came into view, a quiet question hung in the air. What would their future hold? Colton stood on the porch, keys tight in his hand. He looked at Maris, her eyes a mix of excitement and nerves. "Do you want to stay?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. Maris smiled, placing her hand on his. "I want to try, Colton, to build a life here with you." They stepped inside, turning his once solo space into their shared home. Those first days together weren't always smooth. Colton, used to his independent rhythm, sometimes worried. He feared Maris might miss her free-spirited days, backpacking with no plans. One evening, by the fireplace, he couldn't hold back. "Do you ever regret staying here? I mean, you had the whole world out there." Maris looked at him, her gaze soft but firm. She took his hand, saying, "Colton, my world's here now. With you. I chose this, and I don't regret it." Her words dissolved his doubts, replacing them with a warm, quickly. She started working remotely as a graphic designer, bringing in steady income. She also helped Colton with his van interior design project. With her sharp eye for aesthetics, she suggested fresh ideas, from space layouts to eco-friendly materials. One afternoon, as they sketched designs together, Colton laughed. "I didn't know you'd be this good at this. Voyager owes you one." Maris winked. Voyager was the start, but now we're building a whole new journey. Their little house slowly became theirs. Maris hung photos from their trip on the walls, moments of them laughing by lakes, desert sunsets, and Voyager stuck in mud. Colton built her a small bookshelf for her favorite travel books. They planted a vegetable garden out back, though both were clumsy and bickered over how much to water. Those simple moments, small as they were, bound them closer than ever. One early morning, Colton stood in the yard looking at Voyager parked quietly under a tree. The van wasn't just a vehicle anymore. To him, it was proof of their love, a journey full of challenges but bursting with joy. He remembered cold nights when Maris curled up beside him in the cramped van, and days they fixed flat tires in blazing heat. Each scratch on its frame told a story, and Colton's heart swelled. He turned back to the house, seeing Maris brewing coffee, and smiled. "You know," he said, "Voyager gave me more than a trip. It brought me you." They started planning new trips, but as a couple this time. Voyager would still come along, but now it carried not two strangers, but a small family. They talked about exploring Alaska's coast or driving through Montana's wildflower fields. Maris excitedly traced routes on a map, while Colton imagined upgrading Voyager for their comfort. This time, Maris said, "We'll need space for wedding photos, right?" Colton laughed, pulling her close. "Absolutely, and Voyager's our witness." Their life together wasn't perfect, but it was real. They learned to share, to argue, to make up. They built not just a home, but a future, where love, companionship, and Voyager remained essential pieces. With each new dawn, Colton and Maris knew that no matter what lay ahead, they had each other and Voyager to keep writing their story.